say follow me on Twitter if you haven't.
What-
Wishka. I'm
Yeah.
2 away from 500 followers. So hit me up.
Oh, what?
Thank you.
So, this is After Effects basic compositing introduction for tracking. That's basically just one of the tools. Is anyone remotely familiar with what tracking is in a sense, as far as a tool for a visual effects artist? Cool, like 4, 5. So, anyone want to just like briefly describe it? Let's kind of see what it is. Anyone? Do I be calling someone? Julia, Nick, someone? Just talk to me.
It's like when you use something in the frame to base something that you're gonna make visually, where it's gonna be. I don't know how to explain it.
No, you're on the right
Like
track.
that.
That's basically it. So, one of the tools that a compositor has at their disposal at all times is the ability to grab any section or to define an area that the computer, through software like After Effects, is able to track and able to create a path of motion or a string of keyframes that determines the position, rotation, scale values of any given segment that you choose. So in After Effects, I don't know how everyone is super advanced with it, but let's say you have a project, and I'm just going to open up our demo here. We have 2 things I want to take a look at mostly, so we have this clip here. So this is we're missing one file here, sorry. Free solo,
That's that like Star Wars like.
Park Post.
That's his name, right? Free Solo.
It's Han, but he's free. 12 years of
Han
solo.
Free Solo.
12 years on.
All right, so we have this oneer here. I don't know if it's going to play super great, but window preview.
Okay, your history.
Yeah, so this is basically just a wonder. It was a handheld movie shot that we had the Ursa on. It's moving all about the room, and there's a lot of different examples of how you could use tracking in this case, but I'm going to give you a specific one here. And we're going to put something right here in the kitchen. So we have a nice flat area right to the left of our actress here, and instead we want to put a sign, any kind of memorabilia to reminisce with what this was as I was directing it, a 1980s piece. So let's say I'm trying to make it look more 1980s. I want to make it fit into the vibe or the vision that I have. So we have this plain shot, and let's say we chose, as I said, this area right here. So just putting something there, and also we're going to be using the Park Post logo from,
Yes.
Very 1980s.
80s.
yeah, Park Post is about as 80s as it gets. It was,
See brain on the response. That's the 80s.
Jack, how'd you find it? It was on the desktop? This guy?
Yelling.
Alright, sorry about that. Composition or footage.
Composition.
Let's try that. There it is. All right.
Woo!
So we have this 2-dimensional flat Park Post logo that we want to first change the color of because it's not going to stand out on where I've chosen. So getting started here, I'm going to move my workspace. So instead of watching the whole clip, I'm going to break it down to just what I need. So I know maybe the first time I see this area is right on here, but just for all this blur you're having, so that's something that you would have to take into account when you're trying to find a track. This kind of information is pretty hard to follow for the computer because as you can see, there's this kind of falling off of almost like a banding look when you get in this close. But when you're looking for something to track, you want sharp edges, contrast, smooth motion, and nothing that's any whipping or anything that's too drastic of a move might not look like it's actually sticking. So to get started with tracking, let's just hide this for now. We have our clip, and to get started, there's a bunch of different ways in After Effects to initiate the tracking system. So for one, you could right-click on a clip. You go to Track and Stabilize here, and you're going to have 3 or 4 different options depending on what you're working with. Tracking the camera, which will run and initiate a 3D camera track that After Effects employs their own software and algorithms to determine, and it actually looks at a 2-dimensional image or video and can determine spatial relations based on tracking specific points. And by tracking as many points as the system is able to, that's how it comes up with a camera solve. And what that means is it solves how the camera actually moved by looking at the data information that it has available to it, instead of kind of it reconstructs it from the reverse engineering standpoint versus kind of going in. So so tracking camera. So if we did that, what that would do is it gives us this analyzing and background thing, and it's going to look it up, and you can change all your settings here on the left if you can try and help it along the way. So first off, you can see we can analyze, cancel. Here's just kind of basic idea of what the shot type is. It'll speed up the process a lot for you. What you want to see, your 2D source will show you the 2D environment with the tracking points. So I'll show you that once this is finished. And the 3D solved is obviously what we want. Track point size, target size, that'll become relevant in a second. But if you go down to advanced, that's where you kind of have your tracking information that you want to take a look at. So you have auto detect, which is 90% of the time what I'll leave it on just because it does a great job of finding it. Typical and mostly flat and tripod pan. They're pretty self-explanatory, but auto detect, nine times out of 10, I think typical is kind of where it ends up if you leave it on auto. Moving down, detail analysis. I've tried to figure out what the heck this does differently, but it helps for some reason. So if you just turn it on, like that's it. It just, I don't know what it does, but it redoes it and it does it better. So just put it on, I guess.
Okay, Nico, I'm going to take a guess at what that means.
Please do.
I think it's the floating point of how much fidelity you have in the number. So as it's finding all these tracking points,
Yeah.
it's how precise is it?
So almost like the confidence, right?
Right.
Is that what
No,
you're
no,
saying?
no, it's like how many bits of information am I holding onto as I'm
Oh, as I'm going. Okay. All right. So if you
That'd
understand.
be my guess.
Yeah, it's not self-explanatory when it was like all it said when I looked up the definition in like Adobe's manuals was like perform a detailed analysis, but like what does that mean? I don't know. So this takes a really long time, and it might give you a really good result. It might not, just depending on your shot. And for a shot that's as complicated as this, where there's so much movement, it probably is going to really struggle. But what you can do as a quick fix or a quick assistance to this is by shortening down what you're working with if you're going to work with this. So say you have a really short clip, you can just track it in 3D. So let's say we shorten it just to something a little more reasonable where it's less camera movement and it's not as drastic. So something like this.
You gotta trim the clip itself.
Yeah. I can do it. All right, we'll just reset here. So what I just did was I separated these two, which is a keystroke that's Command-Shift-D, but this is our clip right here in the middle, and we don't want to work with anything on the left or right. So now we have this. We're going to select this layer, do the same thing we did earlier, track camera, and hopefully now instead of it being 832 frames, it's only 159. It should be able to speed through that. And just to give us a detailed analysis, we'll do that. But as that's going, we can kind of see here another way we can initiate tracking. So in addition to right-clicking and going through and seeing these options here, which we'll get to these two next over here, you can also access them on the right in what's known as the tracker panel. So everything should be grayed out when you first see it besides motion source because you're not working on anything. So the way you initiate it is you select a layer and you have access to these 4 buttons, or you can just change whatever the motion source is going to be. And that's just defining what the tracker is actually looking at for information. So this is different than the 3D camera tracker because it's going to be a lot more manual. So if we select, for instance, let's make a duplicate of this. We'll get rid of the camera tracker. And these guys, which are our clips. Cool. So now we get rid of this analyzing, and now we have solving camera. This is where After Effects is finalizing their process. And once it's solved, hopefully, we'll see what we want to see in any second. And you have to be very patient with this, and sometimes you have to fight with it. And eventually, sometimes you'll just get into a situation where it doesn't work at all because for whatever reason, sometimes it can't solve. And there's definitely certain numbers of things you can do to fix that, and one of which I would love to show you as soon as it finishes. Here we go. Okay. So now we have a shot that looks like nothing happens, but if you actually click on this layer, you're going to get a ridiculous amount of tracking points. So all these little X's are representative of points that the camera or this software was able to determine, and you can kind of see how by following all the points at once, it can solve the camera, if that makes sense. So, and also you probably are noticing an issue with all of these kind of stupid points on moving subjects. So they're going to cause a lot of issues, and the reason they're bigger is because they're perceived through the software to be closer to the camera. And in reality it is, but it looks like it's probably like on her hair. And this is what these are for here. You see target size, track lens size. We can drop these down and kind of see what they're grabbing onto if they're too big. But just as a quick idea of what I was mentioning with the refining, you'll notice as I go through, my cursor is giving me all these targets that it grabs and makes a triangle out of 3 different points. And what this is doing is determining kind of an automated way of trying to determine the planes in the field here, so that it knows based on this point, and another point, that's a plane in between. So we're trying to define a ground or wall or anything that we know that looks right. So I'm going to try and say we're looking this area. That looks pretty close. Doesn't look the right size, but it looks like the right angle and the perspective. And that's what the key is for using this. So if I right click immediately, you'll just see with that target, I'll get these options for create text, solid, null, and camera. You have to create a camera because the camera is replicating what was just solved with the 3D tracker, and the null, solid, or text is what is receiving the tracking information from the tracker. So if we just, for instance, create a solid in camera, we're going to get this nice big red solid, and just like that, it's already tracked the scene. Just because that target that we determined was consistent throughout the shot, so we're able to just attach to that, and right then and there, we already have this object on the wall. And yeah, so that's kind of the simple way of putting something in space, but then we get to go into refining that from here. So the next thing I could do, forgot to mention, these points that are giving us issues, what I mentioned with this 3D solved earlier, if you switch to 2D source, you're going to get a lot smaller points, actual tracking information here, and you'll see all these points on our actress, which isn't what we want, because the 3D camera tracker is trying to determine the move at which the camera made. It's not trying to determine how things like a person or objects that are moving interact with that, so we have to be the manual person to fix that as the artist. So by going through, for instance, what you do is you can just click and drag and you kind of get this lasso, and you'll start selecting multiple points, and let's just say those are points that we don't want because it's messing up our track and not being able to solve. I can just delete those, and it's going to resolve and try and fix what we just kind of determined based on what we think the issue was. But it actually did a great job even without cleaning it up. But if you are having issues with the 3D camera tracker, you're doing what I just did, but you're not getting this kind of result because of the perspective's off or whatever, then I would recommend going into the 2D source, which is basically going to like the layer panel of it and adjusting your track points, it's manual, it takes time, but it's really how you get the best results. And again, this is just the 3D solved, and yeah, so let's move on here. So let's get away from the 3D tracker here, and we'll go into just the normal tracker. So over here, we have the tracking panel. Also, we have under animation, we just have these drop down here for track camera, track, and Mocha AE, which is, Mocha is a third-party tracking software that's like industry standard. It's incredible. You can track things in ways. I don't even know if does this have access to it?
It should. The main difference between Mocha and the internal After Effects tracker is that Mocha is considered a planar tracker, and so After Effects is meant for points, and it finds point cloud data, and it tries to map things based on how those points interact with each other. When you work with planar data, you're working with like a set of at least 3 points or 4, and you use that quad and track that whole area, and it looks for that area in every frame as opposed to just points and of contrast.
Yeah. So I have an example of that actually to show later, but what he's talking about as far as like planar tracking is a simple example would be a phone screen. You have to track not just one corner of that phone screen, you have to have all 4 corners mapped so that you could map an image onto that to replicate and replace the screen. So that's a simple example of the planar tracking, but it seems like it's trying to open. Oh, here it is. So yeah, we have to register and all this stuff, but this is Mocha. It's really advanced, really powerful, just 2D and 3D tracking, mostly planar tracking software. And if you just watch a couple tutorials, it's pretty, you can get with it. And the benefit of having it integrated into After Effects as well as it is you can just perform a track. So if I had a shot up here, it would come up in this gray box here, and I could perform a bunch of work, export that data, and immediately it's just in After Effects, which before it was like a third-party app that you have to transfer over. So it's awesome. Big fan. Okay, so back up here, so the warp stabilizer is probably, most of you have heard of it before, but warp stabilizer kind of does what the 3D camera tracker just did. It looks at a shot, determines a bunch of point cloud-based data just by tracking individual points and referencing their movements and interactions with each other in order to solve the camera. Warp Stabilizer does a very similar thing, but it'll do, if I apply it, you'll see it's going to analyze in the same way, but instead of trying to solve the camera or determine what the information is within it, this is more for fixing errors. So if you have something simple as a tripod shot that accidentally gets bumped because someone nincompoop walked through and hit it by accident, well, your shot's kind of ruined if it's an interview and it bumps and there's a bunch of wiggle. Warp Stabilizer is supposed to be the fix for that. So as you can see, we have in the result smooth motion or no motion. So if you have a tripod shot, you want to be stationary, put that to no motion, and you should be able to run it, and it will fix it. So if we tried it, I don't want to try it. It would probably do some weird stuff. But yeah, and the way that it does this, the method, is really key to understanding how Warp Stabilizer works. So there's position, scale, rotation, perspective, and subspace warp. These two are really probably my favorite ones to use, just because it is actually changing the position, scale, and rotation settings of these shots to try to fix the errors as far as the movement or the shifting. But again, so because I'm on smooth motion, it's not going to try and get rid of it, but it's going to try and smooth all the jitters out. And up to my settings, it's 50%, which is crazy for Warp Stabilizer. You should never do that high. What I read was at most, like if you have a really bad shot, the most you can put it at is like 25. I'll usually run it at 15 or 10 just to smooth stuff out. Even on like shots that you don't think might need it, just adding it sometimes kind of can help make it just look a little better for whatever reason.
You'll notice that there's less and less cropped as you take the smoothness down.
Yeah, so if I bump this way up, you'll see how it kind of just jumped in. And, all right, well, it's going to keep doing that. So it'll restabilize every time. But it's scaling in so that it has more room on the like this. If you imagine this as a picture, if you're trying to keep it steady against movement, you would try and move it in the opposite direction that the movement's happening in the shot. But in order to do that with this, it scales it up a lot, and sometimes if the movement's too drastic, you'll just like have a shot that doesn't work at all and doesn't look good. So it's a lot of guessing game as far as like seeing what to do. And again, this is the framing. This is what Jeremy was just kind of mentioning with the cropping issues with auto scale and the synthesized edges is when it. So say it scales down instead of up. It needs if there's not anything, it's gonna be black. So what it'll do sometimes is it'll mirror the edge, and it'll kind of look like it's this but that way. It doesn't look as right, but sometimes it'll work if it's like a shot that you have on a green screen or a white background that it doesn't matter what this is because this is white. So then you can just have that as white and it'll work anyway. So it's different situations that kind of help for whatever reason. Yeah, so that's Warp Stabilizer. It's really good for just simple, quick fixes. Don't recommend it for super crazy hard tracks. And that's Warp Stabilizer. So, what did I do? I just moved this over, didn't I? All right, so next on the list is probably the most important tracker, and that's just tracking motion. So let's say we want to take our shot, track motion. It's going to auto-define the motion source. It's going to throw us right into the layer panel. That's where all the manual tracking happens in After Effects. And right away we have this track point 1. I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the window here and the panel to show you what kind of happens. But right off the bat we have this tracker, and you'll notice if I grab the corner of the inside bounding box, we have an inside box and we have an outside box. And does anyone have a guess what they do, how it affects what the point of it is? Jeremy, give a shot. What do you think?
So the inside box is the area that we're looking for initially for every frame. The larger that box is, the more time it's going to take between each frame to look for it.
Mhm.
Because you're looking for more pixels ultimately in that matrix. The outer box is the space that I'm going to look for that inner box between each frame. So if I make that every single pixel on the entire canvas, now this little box is going to be looking for that specific pattern across the entire canvas. So the idea is to try to keep these small enough so that it can go quickly, but also large enough so that they don't end up moving out of those boxes between every frame.
Exactly. So just to kind of reiterate what he was saying with visuals, we have this inner box, and if you don't click on the corner, if you click like in it, you're actually going to usually get like this crazy zoom in. It's because it's super big. But if it was smaller, it's just like this, zoom in that gives you a super zoomed in version of what you're just clicking on. So let's say I need to get her hair, or if I need to get something specific like this. Is that a heart? Yeah, it's a heart. But what he was saying, so this inside bounding box, whatever is in this box, that is what the software is trying to find on every frame. So if I'm gonna say, for instance, this is a pretty good thing here because it's on white, so there's a lot of contrast. It's not really that sharp of an edge, so it's not super defined. But I think because there's a lot of white, it's gonna be a pretty good track because it's gonna know what to look for.
I would do the plug.
You think the plug instead? We could try both and see what happens. But also, even though that this little tiny X is on just the plug, don't forget that what it's looking for is with whatever is in this bounding box. So as small as that is, I'm just looking for the black. It's looking for all of this if I do this.
The X or that plus actually ends up being the corner point of the
Yeah.
null that gets created.
Yeah, exactly. So I can kind of show that in a sec. But this box, as he said, is the outside bounding box and is the range at which the software will look for this, whatever it's on, in. So the bigger this is, the more it has to search through, and the longer it's going to take, and the slower it's going to be. Just as an example, if I just go like this, make it huge,
You did really well.
we have not even a frame yet.
The
So
other thing is that
literally
the
nothing.
the more area you look in and the larger that tracking area, the more likely you're going to get errors as well.
So ideally, you want this to kind of look something like this, where you have your area defined, and the area that it's looking around is not too ridiculous for the computer to spend much time. Because what it's actually doing is scanning it like lines and trying to find the exact pixels that you have here. And the more you give it, the longer it's just going to take. So let's try this again, but with a little more defined area like this. And you can see much faster. And as you watch, I'm just looking here to see this plus to make sure that stays exactly where I want it the entire time. And you'll see that this looks like a glitch, but this is your starting point, and it will go until it runs out of frames to look at. So hopefully we can just let this run through here. And while it's going, I'll kind of talk to you about what's in this panel.
Where do you want to put the crosshair?
The crosshair, well, my reasoning for why I put the crosshair where depends on what I'm doing specifically. But in general, I will always put it on the point of interest that I'm looking for. What else?
So you should put the center of that crosshair on the most contrasty part of your image that you're trying to search for, because you will manually have to move it if the computer can't find it. So it has to be something you can find every frame.
Yeah, that's a really
So
good thing
in the
to
middle of the plug, like you did, probably isn't the best place for it. But on the corner,
Or right where the wire comes out.
top corner, that would probably be a better spot because you always know where that is.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this little point becomes of great importance once you apply the tracking data to an object, and we're about to do that here. So,
Notice
just-
it's decimals of the pixel in terms of like how where it's located on these.
Yeah.
It's
So-
crazy how precise you can get.
also, this is what I was kind of talking about when I
That's
first
what it's
introduced
about.
what tracking was. So, the tracking software, or the compositing software, is looking frame by frame and determining a value of position for the track. So we have this long string of frames that are the path that this point took throughout the shot. And now that we have that information, it's all tracked, it's all good. You can see that it sticks for the most part. But as Shana said, it might not be perfect because that point of reference, that little plus, isn't on a place that I can easily replicate every time. So that's something to watch out for. And that's and also when you're trying to track something, if you have something that goes off frame, having this bounding box over like into this area is a really bad idea. The interior bounding box is a bad idea because it can't look up like pixels that you're not over, so you can only be on like content that can be analyzed. And moving on here, if so we're on it, the current track just tells us what track we're on. So if we have multiple tracks on one shot, so let's just say for some reason I needed to get this information and I needed to get the teapot, I would just be on my layer, track motion again, and this is going to bounce up to tracker 2. So you can just jump in between your trackers here, and there's a lot of different reasons why you need that, but if you're tracking 2 different objects on the same layer, that's probably the most explanatory. Moving down, we got a track type, which is all the different types of things you can do with tracking just as a get-go. Stabilizing, transforming, parallel corner pinning. Corner pinning in general is just kind of what I mentioned with like tracking to a phone screen or applying planar tracking. It's going to track corners of a defined region and automate the process of applying images or video to that range. And I'm about to show you with this specific example. Raw, does anyone know what raw is? Good, don't use it. And last really important thing here is position, rotation, and scale. So for this example, because we're just working in, it's a 3D shot, but it's a two-dimensional track, we're just tracking this on a two-dimensional way, so that's why it's just, moving in this way. I can't see it because I'm on tracker 2. So tracker 1 comes back. So let's say, for instance, I needed to, let's say this shot was not just a still kind of direction. I'm not just looking in one direction. I'm maybe going from here over to here to you guys. So this is a perspective shift. I'm changing, maybe not just as my turn, I'm moving as well. So that's complicating what the track is doing. Because not only am I trying to find the points, if I'm tracking that white box, as I spin and move, there's parallax changing and perspective is shifting. So not only is my x and y, my x value changing, but my z away from me. So depth is a very important thing to think about tracking. So, and what that translates to is if I needed to take rotation or scale into effect. So let's say the shot is moving forward, things are getting bigger or things are getting smaller. I need that to be, carried over with my track. I would just put that on. And what that's going to do for rotation, for instance, is going to give me a second point linked to my first point. By referencing another point, so let's just define my keys, for instance. And we can set this point of interest to a nice contrasty point, like the corner of that. And also these buttons down here, just so you know what they mean. 1 frame back, track backwards, track forwards, 1 frame forward. You don't have to be it anywhere, so you can just go from wherever you are. So if I want to go backwards from here, it's going to start going backwards. And it's taking that information, and then it can compile it and see how it interacts as far as this versus that and determine rotation information once you apply it here. So it's taking a little bit longer than I was hoping. And scale is going to do the same thing. At most, on one track, you're going to have 2. You won't ever have like 3 trackers that are linked to each other just because it's too much. You don't need that. Come on. Got it. As you can imagine, if this was a 10-minute long clip, it's like 2,400 frames it has to track through, so it takes a long time. And we're also getting really lucky with, as you can see, it's like a nice, smooth, cohesive track string. And sometimes you'll have things that'll jump. If things is not going to be perfect, if it's not a good track, it's not going to work every time. So you might see something like this, where it looks all conform, it looks great, but then all of a sudden you have this thing out of line. What you can do is just grab it and move it back into place and manually fix it. In addition to here, these exist obviously on your viewer here, but also underneath in the layer. If you go on the drop down, you're going to see motion trackers, and tracker 1, tracker 2, one's the one we want, point 1 and point 2, and we have all this good information as far as the feature center, the feature size, the confidence, the search size. You don't really have to know what all of it means. The most important stuff is just knowing that the feature center is pretty much where, let me go to 2 so you can see what I'm looking at. Feature center is the value of the point. So if you're going through and you want to look at your keyframes, I have all of these points here represented as points here. And I know if I went to frame, let's say this was the frame that was off. I know that if I want to adjust this feature center, this is that keyframe right here. And that represents that point right here. And then I can adjust it, fix it, and move it back into place however it needs to be. And yeah, so that's kind of how you would just review and go through and catalog. And if you need to copy tracking information just from here, you just select these points, copy, paste, sort of stuff. And yeah, so that's basically. And the last thing in the tracking panel, which is the part we've kind of waited for, is applying the information. So in order to apply, you have to edit the target. You have to pick where it's going. So right now it's set to track solid 1. But just for reference, I can make something like a solid or a null object or really anything that can absorb data as far as After Effects is concerned. And like a solid's great. So you get whatever, you just make it. And now I'm going to change my target to my black solid. Okay, apply, X and Y, X only, Y only. I want X and Y because it's both of them. Ooh, got this blob. Now, I'm going to go through, scale this down a bit. So it's kind of, I'm looking for. I can still affect all of it, but because my rotation was on, you'll notice I have all of these rotation things, and it's going to try, and the rotation is going to be taken into account. Because we don't have to worry about that, I'm gonna turn it off. And now we just have this solid. And if we did it correctly, which hopefully we did, because I just applied that information, it receives all of it and it sticks like it should. Yay, so there it is. And now one key principle that's kind of like pretty advanced for tracking, I don't see people do enough that I wish they did, is understanding the relationship of how layers interact in After Effects. So now that I have this information, all of this information for this track is right here in position. I could copy paste that somewhere, but instead, just to keep it a little more neat, I think it's a much more professional way to do it, is to use parenting. So I think we've talked about it before, but by setting one parent or one layer as the parent or child to another layer, it inherits all of the transform and I don't want to say effects, but some effects kind of copy to that, but they don't go up. It only goes down. So parent to child always. So if I take my black solid, which has my track information, and let's say I want to bring in my park posts. Oh no, it's just this one. So I've got my park post logo. Can't see it because it's not on top. And here it is. So now I have this, and one thing I could do is I could have just applied that information directly to this park post layer, and it's going to use this anchor point as that point of reference, and it's going to attach it at that point. Another option that's a little bit more fluid and doesn't give as many issues sometimes is just a parent, like I said. So we have this little pick whip here, or just the parent and link dropdown. I can set the parent just from the dropdown for my park post logo to my black solid, and just based on where it is and at what point I parent it, it will stick there. It will inherit all of the same transform controls. So if it was over here, and I pick whip or set this to my black solid, it will inherit all of those tracking information from there. So what that allows you to do is use many layers parented to the same layer or to one layer that has information and reference it without actually taking the time to go through here, grab all of these points, copy paste them onto this layer, and then make sure it all works, nothing's wrong. It's just a faster way of doing it. And really in After Effects, if there's one thing I can speak to is like what you got to learn is everything is like cheating. You just have to learn how to do things better and faster. There's a billion ways to do the same thing, and trying to do it the same simple way is, it gets old. It takes too much time. You want to save seconds, milliseconds over time, because over time that's how you save time and make more in less time. So that's kind of what I've been trying to work on as a compositor, I guess. And yeah, is there any questions or anything? I'm talking a lot. I want to talk to you guys. I'm not trying to be a teacher. I know it's a little weird, but all right. So yeah, and also because this information is on here physically, I don't need to see it. It still has all this information, and this logo can still reference it even though it's not seen. So then from now on, I have this as my track solid. I can just always reference it like for the rest of the project. That's kind of the idea. But yeah, so that's that. And then let's move over here to, I want to say, yeah, so another really cool thing that After Effects has just integrated in the last couple of years is like automated face tracking. It's free with the software, but it's really powerful, and I use it a lot for my thesis project, which was called Chipped. There's a visual effect that came up a lot, which was eye glows, and I had to determine using Saber and a couple of just like pre-made assets to make it look like their eyes were in fact glowing. And once I had that, I had to determine how to track it to their face. I could have, just put a tracker on the black dot in his eye, or maybe just on the whole eye, and all that, but it just wasn't giving me the results that I needed. It wasn't as specific. So instead, what I turned to was the face tracker. So, all right, so I have a bunch of clips here with like all the different faces that we put eyes on, but I'm just gonna do just a quick one of this guy because it's super up close and super easy to kind of see what's going on. So you need the face to be front facing. That's usually the hardest part about it, is getting a shot that works like this. So I'll define my area just like this. Command-Shift-D to cut, move over, Command-Shift-D to cut. We have this shot now. So the only thing you need to do to initiate the tracking for the face is it's the exact same thing as the tracker before, but we need to define the range or the area for the tracker to look at that it assumes it's the face. So I'm going to create a mask just by grabbing my pen tool, and just drawing a rough shape, around kind of like the eyebrows. Oh, shoot. So right there, it's starting to make a shape tool instead of a path or a mask, forgive me. We'll go yaw, yaw, and nope. Why is that? Huh. Trying to give this guy a mask. Let's try it with the circle. What the heck's going on? Might be having some glitches because I can't get the mask to show up.
I think you're on the first frame.
Let's try it now. There we go. Yeah, that must have been it. All right, so I wasn't on the right frame there. But I'm just going to go ahead and make my selection, kind of draw a rough shape. All I want to get is the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Even at that terrible shape should work. And you don't even need it to be on like that, so it's not creepy. So there you go. So it's on here. We've defined the area. And now this is the part that I never forgot. You have to click on the word mask. And now this whole thing switches from that to this thing, which gives you a couple more options under method. So instead of just up to perspective, we get this thing called face tracking outline only and face tracking detailed features, which they do exactly as they say. It will give you the outline. If you track this, like basically the shape that I made, it'll give me the face. So if you're trying to put a mask on someone or change their face or give them some gory blood in their face and stuff, you just need the outline. You don't need the specifics. But for my purposes, I needed the details. I need like everything. So I'm going to set face tracking detailed feature. Mask is mask 1, and that's it. I'm just going to go ahead, set rest pose like this, and start going backwards. It'll kind of refine my mask a little bit, and then it's just going to start. So it's going to analyze, and it's super cool how it works, but you don't even see it until it's done here. That looks terrible. So it thinks that is its face right there. So
Wait, that's not his face?
yeah, no. So let's go here instead. So I'll do this a little bit nicer just so you can see how kind of maybe it should look. So this is.
Is that a rest pose though?
No. So I shouldn't have hit that rest pose button. That's I think maybe why I messed up so much. But a rest pose is basically if you had a shot where you're working on a character that you maybe need reference of or using reference of a face. So say you set a camera up like this and you're talking to the camera and you can set a pose of rest so that it has for reference and it's able to reference it for future. As it knows what the face is, but it doesn't know what the constraints of how it moves are. So that's by setting the rest pose, it knows what to go back from.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so now we've got a little bit more defined here. Just kind of clicking and dragging to make it a little smoother. Got this. Let's try it again. Face tracking detailed, and we're gonna go forward. There we go. So now it grabbed on immediately, and you'll see all these almost looking like anchor point things, but they're sticking immediately to a bunch of different really valuable parts of his face. So right off the bat, you'll see obviously on the pupil, which is what my purposes are for. You're also getting the insides and outsides of the eyes, the eyebrows, the lips, the nostrils, the nose. I mean, it's awesome. You can do everything, the cheeks. Sometimes I can even do ear shape if you need that for some reason. So now that we have that, it finished, it's done. And of course, we might have to refine it a bit, but by having this information the same way, so instead of it being under motion trackers, it's called face track points. Down the way, you'll see we get left eye, right eye, nose, mouth, cheeks, and chin. And under those are even more information as far as the inner, middle, outer eye, pupil, and outer. This data, in the same way that we just use that black solid to translate the information to the Park Post logo, can be parented or information, or so that the information can be referenced for another object. So we have this pick whip here, and there's other ways to do it, but this is probably the easiest. So let's just say this left pupil is what I wanted to attach something to. I will grab. I'm gonna make it full screen so I can see here. So I've got. What was this shape? Oh, thank you, appreciate it. Should be all good here in a sec. I'm just gonna make a shape so you can see. So let's just say this was my glowing eye. I'll set it kind of where I want it. I'm gonna lower the opacity a little bit just so I can see where it is. All right, this looks good. I'll move my anchor point over the eye. And all right, so we got just like this weird shape on his eye. Now I got the shape layer. I'm gonna parent the left pupil, or I'm sorry, the shape to the left pupil. So, oh no, I can't. and that's because it's a little bit more of a complex setup. So you have to use some scripts. So by getting into that, you hold Option and click on this guy, and you'll get this dialogue, and you can do some information with that. But I want to do it to this instead. So I'm going to track position of this. Hold Option, click on the stopwatch. I get that same pick whip, but it's specifically for the attribute that I selected. So I'll go pick whip here to shape layer, and other way. Sorry, I got it the other way. This one goes to position. Is going to go to the people. Where's effects, face track, left eye. And left eye, I want to say it thinks this is his left eye, like it puts it in the perspective of the character. So this is his left, this is his right, I want to say. So I might have to do it like this. Left. So here we go. This is what I was trying to get to. Just tracking or applying. Please do it again. Taking this pick whip, attaching my shape via position to the left pupil. It puts a bunch of script in, click, and it's now applied. And scary because we see this. Turn that off. There we go. And now, similarly, we kind of have it tracked, but instead of manually tracking it, the computer did it for us and have it just attach that pupil. So that's just like a basic and then you can start working from there on the creative parts of how it looks and what you're doing. So look, now he has a red monocle. So that's kind of what we learned here. And yeah, this is about the basis of all the things you can do with the tracker. You just kind of got to be creative and come up with what you're going to do the next. Any questions, any concerns, problems? Am I wrong? Am I lying? No? All right.
Have you run into stuff with the face tracker, just unexpected like bugs and stuff?
Oh yeah, thousands. Literally here. This is the So I'm gonna I'll save that. Sure. Come on. We want. I can show you. All right, we'll go here. Let's do. Hang on. So this was my actual project just for all the eyes. I had to kind of keep it separate because my project file got to be like 18 gigabytes, so it's too big. And you can kind of just see the work that goes into each shot. There's lots of effects missing, I know, but. Here we go. So what I determined was the best course and method for this was, so I did the same thing I just showed you with the face. I tracked his face, got a bunch of information in my stuff here. So that's all that. I refined it. This was all the information I needed. And from there, I tried to determine how I could attach glow as well as like a flare. So I ended up splitting it apart by left, right, and flares and eyes. So, and actually this, I don't even know what this one was. I want to say this might have been track information, but I broke it up into multiple things and did what I just did with the black solid and attached all the things that I wanted to be on his eye to just a thing that had all the information already on it. So kind of using it as a proxy in between instead of attaching the information directly to these two layers. You can't see the effects because I don't have the plugins on this computer, but Saber, so it's supposed to be glowing and looking cool and stuff. And Jeremy, there's one other thing that you had mentioned that I wanted to show an example of, and I am completely... Planner tracker. Yes. Thank you. Got it. That is right here.
We gotta get up to 5 tomorrow, right?
Oh no. All right, so this is that planner tracking thing I was talking about with the corner pin. So my task for this was to replace what this was with a picture. Yeah, this is a really good picture. It's nice. And what I had to do was I used the set this, and I used the perspective corner pin because, as I mentioned, when you're moving a camera, if this camera was stationary, it wouldn't have been a problem just to track it. But because there's a slight push in, I don't know if you can kind of see it over time, that creates somewhat of a parallax for us, and that caused me a lot of problems. So I had to work out.
The reflection. on the glass.
Yes, the shot isn't done. I'm still working on this. But the track was. I'm just showing you the track. So basically, I tracked all 4 corners in the same way that we just did. They're all linked because I'm on this perspective corner pin setting. And as soon as I set up the first frame, press go, it gave me all this information, and then I just applied it to this layer. I didn't even do like the whole intermediate layer to absorb it because it could just apply it. It sets the corners of the image to what those tracking points are, and then I just had to scale and make sure that it looks right. But you'll see I'm still not in love with how the perspective shift happens when so the camera's moving, the arm's pulling the photo here, and he's like twisting it. So even though the track is correct, I don't think it looks correct because I think there's more depth involved, and you'll kind of see if it would play, but it's, After Effects. Let's see, here, if you watch it quarter speed or quarter quality. So you can kind of see, I tried adding motion blur, and I was kind of just having this issue because, so this is the thing I wanted to talk to you.
Breaking down when it leaves the screen.
Yeah. That's it's like this compression that's happening because the track was. I know exactly. But my you'll see how it kind of scrunches right here. Scrunch. Yeah. So that's like what I gotta fix. But
Scales out of it.
yeah, it looks weird. But one thing that I really struggled with, and Brad, maybe you can answer this question because Forms couldn't, Dave Laron could not. You cannot, without the full version of Mocha, put motion blur back into something that is not used with like transform controls. So like if I start an object here, move it to here, and put motion blur, I'm gonna get blur. If I use the perspective tracker to attach something here to here, there's no motion blur because there's no transform control applied to the layer that it can generate motion blur. Yeah, so I've been trying to come up with ways of fixing that.
Fake it, do post-process motion blur.
Yeah, so that's what I have currently.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I have.
But I don't think that's where your problem's coming from.
Yeah, no, but it looks weird if I take off everything. So like you'll see, I had a directional blur. Let me choke on my spit real quick. Yeah, so besides the scrunching, you could the blur doesn't look right. Like it just looks way off. So I tried to match the blur of this top of the frame
Why
with
does it need to be a clean exit?
because I wasn't on set and they did that.
Well, I mean, why do you need to have the picture fully move off frame in that shot?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
Cut it shorter.
Yeah, cut it
I mean, I'd love to. I do know how to fix that issue though. It's literally I can show you. What's happening is, I can do it. As soon as I see it. Why am I not getting? So, as it goes to here, you know what? I switched to manual. I didn't even bother tracking this because it kept giving me all these issues because it got so blurry.
So you just sort of manually keying.
Yeah, so I basically, as you can see, I went all the way up to here, stopped on this frame, and then proceeded with a manual adjustment for the transform position here. So I've just tried to kind of go through and adjust. Actually, position's not right. It's corner pin. So the corner pin is you can set each corner. So I know the upper left I can adjust, and try to make it look better or whatever. But that's what's off on these last couple frames. So if I move forward here, you'll see. This is what I'm struggling with actually. So as it comes, you'll see the distance. I figured it out as like 4,206 between top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right. As it goes off screen, I haven't been able to keep that distance exact for all of it. So you'll see the distance between the top and bottom points gets smaller and smaller, and that's why that scrunching's happening. So you'll see as frames go on, so see how like close this is versus back here, I had that nice space. So I need to go back through and make some adjustments, obviously.
And just zoom way out while you're doing it. You're just trying to get it close.
Yeah, exactly.
Maintain intuitive perspective.
Yeah, so this is
again, like it just seems like if there's no reason to have a clean exit of that photo on that shot, just cut it earlier.
I would love to.
Is it because you're locked or what?
This is a project that was sent to me, and I'm helping a friend. So
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's not one I had a lot of
Gotcha.
room with, but yeah, I'm doing this is like a music video that we're just finishing up, but yeah, so that's just a practical example of how you can use tracking to put an image into a plane like that.
Is there anything that you can do with vector analysis to see like what the direction things are moving, and then just use that to interpolate and guess where the point should go off?
You would think I would think that you could do that. I just didn't do it until you said it. So the other thing was there's scripts that I could put in to like fake the motion blur between just motion that happens between any object, like even something like this, which is really just like these points are changing. So the shape of this isn't actually changing; it's just the perspective because of the effect, and that's why it doesn't create motion blur like it should. That when I did it, so. Yeah, so that's kind of just an example that I wanted to show that Jeremy hit on with the planar tracking. But I've gone over time. Thank you for your time. Hope you learned something.
Park.